have you ever heard of maybe roid rage or acne issues or ED issues, or maybe that you're increased risk of stroke because of testosterone? Well, we're going to actually talk about all these and a lot more in this week's episode of Too Much Test, episode number 2. But before we get into that, we are not doctors. We are not recommending anything that we talk about in this video. It's strictly for entertainment and educational purposes. What's up, guys? How you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. How about yourself?
Awesome. What'd you think of the intro?
Good.
So let's start off with some of these things here. Let's start with roid rage, because that's one of the things that I actually just had the conversation with a buddy of mine. He's got diabetes and he has kidney related issues at this point, and his testosterone's super low. And he's telling me how he's afraid of testosterone because of roid rage. And I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this.
It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely not like you see it portrayed in the media. You know, you take testosterone and you start beating up your girlfriend, or, you know, just punching people or breaking stuff. It's not like that at all. For me personally, the best way I think I could describe it is testosterone is a personality enhancer. So if you have a short fuse and you're a dick, you're going to be more of a dick with a shorter fuse, you know, on testosterone. That's my personal thought on it. If I'm on higher doses of test, there are some times where if I was at a normal test level, I'd be like, but then that little extra push is like, all right, I'm gonna address this. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
What does a higher dose of test mean to you? Like, what is that? So I have reference.
Hypothetically, it would be like 500 milligrams.
Okay.
I've never actually done that, but hypothetically, that's what it would be.
Of course. So no, you never do that. Dave, what are your thoughts on that? I've got something to share afterwards.
So for me, at least, for like TRT, for instance, it's more of like, it just makes you feel like more of a man. So you do have, I wouldn't say aggression, but I'm naturally very mellow. I'm easygoing. So I never had any issues with that. It makes you, like he was saying, it makes you more of what you are. But the thing with testosterone is I never really had that quote unquote roid rage that we see in the media. The way we see portrayed in the media is usually, first off, these are hotheads. So they're getting that part of their personality enhanced, and they're not on just testosterone. They're on probably tren or a progesterone-based steroid, because progesterone, you want to talk about feeling emotional or hormonal, it feels much worse to be high on progesterone than high on estrogen. So that's what we see with that roid rage, is usually the drug related to tren, is that what's dictated, but they just call it steroids, right? There's something like steroid, birth control is a steroid. So
yeah. Correct. There's actually there's a movie that my brothers are in, and one of the things that people don't talk about in terms of the media is that like everything is sensationalized. So when they would film a scene, they would have to do it 40 times just to make it more exaggerated than it needs to be, like 100%. But I agree with what you guys are saying. But then I also found this study over on PubMed, the effects of superphysiological dosages of testosterone. And they basically tested 40 normal dudes between the age of 19 and 40 in different groups with testosterone. They did 4 groups. They did like a placebo with no exercise, a testosterone group with no exercise, a testosterone group with exercise. And they were interviewing them, and they were also interviewing their spouses. And there was no change. They measured like, were they more irritable, like inwardly or like outwardly towards others, or these kinds of things? And there was no change. So it goes up. The data is pointing in exactly the same direction. And I have never had any issues, or, you know, it's like you were saying, if you're normally a douche, you're probably just going to be more of a douche.
What's crazy is at the end of that study, it says super physiological does not cause more aggression, but that does not mean that even higher doses couldn't. So they leave the door open as, you know, hey, 1 gram doesn't do anything toward aggression, but if we jumped it up to 2 grams, maybe, you know, I like how they left that open there.
Well, let me add a little bit of clarity to super physiological, right? So when we're talking about super physiological, it really has to do with one year above normal ranges. So technically super physiological could be 300 milligrams, but in clinical trials, usually when they're talking about super physiological, sometimes they do 200s, which are normal ranges because you're usually at the upper normal. Super physiological, sometimes they consider 300 at the super physiological range. Obviously, it's codependent on how that person absorbs it and everything like that and titrates. And then the other group is usually 600 milligrams. So they do have, and people don't talk about this. Like we literally have clinical trials of them doing 600 milligrams. When I think super physiological, I do not think 300 milligrams. I think 600 milligrams, but technically 300 milligrams on paper could be super physiological. And you can get prescribed that from any TRT doctor, endocrinologist, anything like that. So I just want to add a little bit of clarity. When they say super physiological, it kind of leaves it open to whatever they are testing. And they probably, if we dove into the study, I'm sure they would say, but I'm sure it was like 300 milligrams or 600 milligrams. One of the two is usually.
Yeah. So one of the things that my buddy also brought up, because he's, there's a lot of things in like life that he's just not, he didn't say this directly, but it came across this way, that he's just not doing in life, which we know is a huge benefit of like testosterone. But the other thing he mentioned was that his dad had died of a heart attack, and he was afraid of testosterone increasing like stroke risk and like adverse cardiovascular events. So have you guys seen anything on that?
I mean, from what I've seen is a lot of these older studies is where they showed stroke, prostate, heart attack. And I think a lot of the newer ones are showing that there's either a very loose correlation or there's not really a correlation. I know for a long time they thought that prostate cancer was caused by testosterone, and now they're starting to see that it's not caused by testosterone, but if you have it, and you take testosterone, it'll exacerbate the cancer.
Okay.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, you go ahead first.
So there's a lot of data out there showing from the other point of view, right? From low testosterone increases risk of heart disease, like cognitive decline, adverse cardiovascular events.
Yeah.
And that's not talked about, but they're like, testosterone is bad. It's going to increase this and that and the other thing. But reality, low testosterone increases these risk factors that people are like fucking scared of, or whatever the case is.
Yeah. So this is like what you were referring to is like older studies. We have a lot of data now. We even have super physiological data that people are kind of doing their own clinical stuff on the side within senior areas and stuff like that. But just strictly on a testosterone basis, when you're talking about stroke is actually the most dangerous side effect of testosterone. I will be honest, like that is a real thing, but it just has to do with elevated red blood cell count. So you need to figure out what your body at your dose, which is 200 milligrams, 100 milligrams, you probably won't have issues with it. 200 milligrams, probably have some issues with it. And then 300 milligrams, like wherever your doctor is prescribing you, you have to figure out what rate you're increasing your red blood cell count production to figure out when you need to at least donate blood or dump blood, because that's then actually the number one risk is stroke. So do have to just talk about that stroke factor. So the stroke is a risk. Now, when it comes to like cardiovascular diseases, what you were just referring to is the lipid profile, essentially. It improves, if you have bad testosterone levels, it improves lipid profile 100%. It's been proven time and time again, even in short-term research, it shows it. Long-term research, phenomenal. Shoot, Cialis and Viagra, they don't even talk about it. It literally clears out blood to make sure that you're not getting clots and stuff like that. So if your testosterone levels are off and you're controlling your testosterone levels, you're controlling your estrogen levels from it, it will actually help you cardiovascular wise. You have to be careful with the red blood cell count. But and then when you're talking about super physiological ranges, everyone's threshold is different. Like we were just talking, you were watching my blood work video. And I'm just open about it. I did go super physiological just to see if I could crush my cholesterol profile, because in paperwork, once you go super physiological, the cholesterol profile, the HDL on paperwork reduces by about 25 to up to 40%, and the LDL has an inverse relation to it. So obviously that's the opposite direction. Whereas in my blood work, guess what? Perfect. Literally perfect levels. And
so what was your HDL and LDL?
Off the top of my head, my HDL was a 57 or 59, so which is phenomenal for a male.
Yes.
Like that's insane.
Yeah.
And then my LDL was a 99.
Okay. So that's right on that cusp of,
Yeah, and I do want to clarify that, like my diet, because I haven't really been doing a quote unquote heavy duty bodybuilder diet right now. Anyways, I've been eating very, very lax. I've been eating as much food and stuff like that. So technically, my cholesterol profile should have been hit relatively hard, and that's it. I just wanted to go on record that literally it is bio-individual. Like super physiological conditions are very bio-individual, and that's like just referring back to that study. Everyone's different. But on paperwork, it usually does take that hit where you do have lipid profile issues once you go super physiological. In general pop, right? Like I may be an anomaly, and so I will apply that to another individual, right? That's why we have doctors running our blood work and stuff like that to make sure that we don't have those issues.
And when you talk about stroke, like as you like I think I was taking a look at it, and you were taking a look at it from the standpoint of TRT. But it's good if you're talking about stroke, you have to consider the dose for where you're at, because testosterone in and of itself doesn't necessarily increase the risk of stroke, especially if you do some type of fucking preventative shit. Not a crazy amount, just a little bit if you're in the TRT range, for most folks.
Direct but indirect relationship, correct. 100%.
Yes.
You know, what's interesting is I saw a couple of different studies, and I don't remember them exactly, but I remember the general gist was that they're starting to think that the higher hematocrit levels from just TRT, not lifestyle based, are not as bad as they once thought. I mean, obviously, it still can happen. You still have to monitor it. Check your hematocrit. I donate blood like once every 4 to 5 months, just not even based off blood work, just to do it. But another interesting thing I saw is they studied these people that live really high up elevations, and they were seeing hematocrit levels of like 60, 64, 65. But these people aren't like stroking out and falling off the mountain, but their bodies have adapted to that because that's where they're born, that's where they lived. So it's interesting, that.
Because I saw something similar to that too, because people think that the hematocrit is going to cause the issue, but that link is not even clear, because there's some data that you were just presenting there, but also there's, and I don't know specifically what it is, but there's a little bit of a difference between the what is increased for stroke risk versus what is actually increased with testosterone. And the link there is not 100% sure. Like, hey, this is what happens when this happens kind of thing. But it's definitely something that needs to be paid attention to, and more like research in the future. You mentioned cholesterol. Like that's a common thing that's mentioned, or a common issue for like a lot of people. So have you guys had any issues with, obviously you didn't have any issues, Dave, but test your levels. Did you have any issues?
Let me actually pull up. I mean, I think the last time I got my HDL, it was 39. I have this little comparison, but I don't think I've updated it.
So I got to know what you guys are doing for yours. I'm going to be checking mine probably in the next couple of months. My HDL was 26 last time, and I made some dietary changes, but I haven't done anything else to that. And my LDL was 98 or 99. Total cholesterol was only 160 though. And then
that's pretty good. That's not bad.
But I still prefer my HDL a little bit higher than 26 or 27, whatever it was.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll share. I can. Well, I have to go back over here. Okay, let's keep talking. I was going to share my screen. I can show you.
So, Dave, what are like cholesterol? Generally speaking, is a relatively common thing that needs to be paid attention to, at least from a lifestyle standpoint, with testosterone, at least in the TRT range. Not that it's a huge issue, but it's something that needs to be paid attention to, but should be paid attention no matter what.
it should be paid attention to no matter what. It literally doesn't have to do with testosterone replacement therapy. It literally does not. I guarantee you, if you fix your diet, you can improve your cholesterol. Now, when you're talking about super physiological, like if you're cycling up on actual like a gear cycle, then like you're gonna crush your lipid profile, like period. Like I may be an anomaly case where I don't know. I haven't like really tested it out. Like I haven't run like crazy amounts of gear. Like I don't just do that anyways. I just did it to see if I could crush it because I assumed it would and it didn't. But that is something that people need to watch their diet because that is a longevity approach. There are a lot of longevity things that we can talk about on the show, and we're going to dive into those subjects for sure. Blood sugar was one of them that we spoke about. So, but that cholesterol thing, that is one of the biggest issues that males have that I guarantee you I could hypothesize. The reason why males die before females is one, we're carrying more muscle mass. So the heart has to work harder. And then two, guess what? Our cholesterol profiles suck compared to females normally. Yeah. So like it just is what it is. We're vulnerable to it.
Okay, check this out. So I'll show you. I have HDL and LDL from before TRT and starting TRT on a little graph here. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. Okay. So walk us through very detailed, like what you're looking at, so people could, for listeners, for people who are listening.
So no testosterone. This was before TRT. My HDL was 41 and LDL was 85.
Okay.
Then on TRT, HDL only dropped to 39 and LDL dropped to 78.
So how long were you on TRT when you were only on for a couple weeks at that point?
Yeah, that was, about 2 months. 2 months on TRT. And then 3 months after that, my HDL dropped a little bit to 35 and my LDL went up to 88. Then it goes up to 37 and 83, 41.97, 44.11, and 35.85. So I'll stop sharing, but it doesn't seem like TRT has really changed my lipid profile really much at all. I mean, nothing outside of what the tolerances are for the errors in the test or,
So I looked at that briefly, but you had compounds at the top. Those were strictly TRT, because mine wasn't strictly TRT. There was some other stuff in there. So that's probably why mine was fucked up. But what? What?
Oh, you're saying, was there any other activity outside? Hypothetically, maybe. Hypothetically, it's happened since I've been on TRT. So, I mean, I would assume that. Now, I know I didn't get blood work hypothetically on anything higher than a TRT dose. I know that.
Okay.
Got it.